Okay, so let's start. It's 9:02, I think. It's we given enough time. So welcome to our conversation about protecting youth from social media addiction. It's a topic very close to my heart, and I really feel privileged today that I can lead this conversation with such an amazing panel. So here's how it's going to work. First, I'm going to do a brief introduction of myself. Then I'll pass the floor to the panelists so they can introduce themselves. We'll have an introduction with a set of questions in order to set the context, and then we'll turn it over to you to ask questions through a Q&A. So let's start. So my name is Christophe Join, and I've been working in the technology and media industry for over 30 years now, including 10 years at Netflix, where I led some of their technology platforms. And I'm also engaged in civic initiatives to bridge California and France. So Jessica, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you. Good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. First, I want to thank Christophe for giving us the opportunity to have this important conversation. I'm Jessica Heldman. I'm an associate professor at the University of San Diego School of Law. I have the privilege of focusing my work on child rights, that area of the law. I'm also the executive director of the Children's Advocacy Institute at the School of Law. We go by the acronym CHI, so you might hear us use that term throughout the conversation. CHI is a research, academic, and advocacy organization that focuses on protecting child rights, as well as promoting the health, safety, and well-being of all children. We do this on a statewide level in California, and we do it on a federal level by working in Washington, D.C. as well. Our work has focused on child safety. We have successfully enacted vital protections for children, and none more important than the work we've done on social media and online protections. That work has been spearheaded by my colleague, who I'm happy to turn it over to, Ed Howard.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Ed Howard. For about 30 some odd years now, I've been a public interest litigator, lobbyist, and advocate here in California. My first emphases were consumer, civil rights, and environmental law, but since 2006, I've had the privilege of serving as the senior counsel for the Children's Advocacy Institute based here in the capital of California, in Sacramento. Prior to doing public interest work, I worked at a large international law firm where I specialized in First Amendment defense. I am married here in Sacramento. I have two grown children who have surpassed me in every way, and two very poorly behaved dogs. And with that, it is my pleasure to turn it over to my friend and former Assembly member, Jordan Cunningham.
Thank you, Ed. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name's Jordan Cunningham. From 2016 to 2022, I represented the Central Coast of California in the state assembly, where I was privileged to work with Ed and Jessica and a great team to work on the first in the nation social media liability bill, which we'll discuss in detail today. I'm a practicing attorney. I have a law firm with my wife, and I am a public affairs consultant now, and I have 4 beautiful children that I generally love and adore.
That's awesome. Thank you all for this introduction. So again, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask a series of questions to set the stage, and then we'll turn to a Q&A. For the Q&A, please write your question in the chat. You have the chat at the bottom, so write your question in the chat, and Brennan will read the questions. I will direct the question to the appropriate panel member and maybe ask a follow-up question if needed. We would like this to be a conversation, so don't be shy. Ask a tough question. We'd love it if it was a debate. So here we go. First question is going to be for Jessica. And Jessica, from your perspective, what are the biggest risks of social media use for young people? You're on mute.
Yes, I got it. Okay. Thank you for the question. So my perspective comes from not only being an attorney and an advocate, but also being a mom. Let me not be left out by talking about my two teenage boys who I adore. And so I think about the harms and the risks from that perspective as well. One of the key harms that or risks that concerns me and us in this field is the kind of obsessive nature of social media engagement among young people. And frankly, this is something that they're particularly vulnerable to because of their developing brains. It's one of my areas of research and expertise is just how vulnerable young people are because they haven't yet developed the parts of their brain that help them exercise good judgment. They are impulsive. They are particularly drawn to, rewards, anything that gives them that dopamine hit. And social media platforms are designed specifically to engage that kind of positive reward interaction. The feeds are built to be addictive, and kids are really in a vulnerable position and really unable to resist that. On top of the feeds being addictive, the content that is being delivered through these addictive feeds gives us real concern. There's a lot of risk for mental health issues, not only related to the addictive feeds, but related to the kind of content that is really making it even more problematic for children who are comparing themselves and trying to figure out their place in the world. When they're getting information and images that have to do with body image, especially for girls, it's causing a lot of problems with disordered eating and self-esteem. And then the last piece I would say is a real concerning risk and something that terrifies me is the risk of victimization. There are bad actors, there are predators out there who are using social media to engage with kids in ways that put them in the position of a true victim, especially of sexual abuse. And when these predators get their hands on child sex abuse material, they use it to threaten kids. They use it to coerce kids to engage even more deeply in abuse, in behaviors that they're truly being abused through. And we're seeing that is leading to self-harm. It's actually leading to kids committing suicide. So the risks are those truly of life and death.
Thank you, Jessica. So, Ed, Jessica just mentioned that feeds are built to be addictive. Content is built to be addictive. So, what will data or evidence convince you that legislation was necessary in California?
Right. So the origin story in part about how Jordan and Kai and a colleague of his, Jordan is a Republican, his joint venture on our first bill was a Democrat, really started from a public affairs perspective, candidly. What really was kind of the big bang moment for social media reform efforts in children in the United States was the whistleblowing of former Facebook executive Frances Haugen. Once all of the material came out from her whistleblowing that affirmed that Facebook now Meta knew quite a bit about the harms that it was causing to children, including what it called, I believe it was problematic use, which was a euphemism for addiction. Our original sense was that we needed to do a bill at minimum to keep public attention on the harms of social media. And if we happen to get a bill along the way, that would be great. But that was sort of the original view. What makes legislation necessary is that if you are especially when it comes to addiction, if you are a private company with fiduciary duties to maximize shareholder returns, your ability medically to addict your customers to returning to your product is a pretty powerful thing to generate profits. So there really wasn't going to be a cessation or reduction on the addictive features of social media platforms without legislation, precisely because it's such a profitable means of ensuring that eyes stay on screens and therefore eyes see ads. So that was really what was important. I think the third thing was that it takes quite a while for significant legislation, not quite a while, but it can take a while for significant legislation actually to get passed. It's extremely rare, especially when you have very powerful opposition, for the first bill that you do to get through. You learn a lot about what your opponents are saying. You learn a lot about your own position by having it scrutinized by the opposition. So the sooner you start, the sooner you're going to get to the finish line.
Makes sense. Thanks. So, Jordan, we're all using social media, and we all have our ideas about social media. So, when this was discussed, were there any misconceptions that you encountered when presenting the issue to the public or to policymakers?
Yeah, misconceptions. There were a lot. I'd say there were two major ones. The first one, and this tended to be from older folks that did not have teenagers living in their homes. The first one was, well, isn't this the parent's responsibility? Shouldn't the parent be monitoring what their kid's doing online? Shouldn't the parent have the onus to make sure that their child's not accessing harmful content on social media sites or other online sites? And that, we responded, well, first of all, you should try parenting in the modern era with teenagers. I mean, they socialize on Snapchat, they socialize on TikTok. That is how they connect with their peers. That is how they, especially during the COVID era, that is how kids interacted with the rest of their peer group. As a parent, you have no weapons at your disposal. You have no chance. You don't know what's being put in their stream. You don't know what the algorithm's sending them. So you really are in a classic Hobson's choice, where it's either I ban all of this and I don't give them a phone, and you kind of live like it's still 1985, or you are putting your kids at the mercy of these tech companies and their algorithms. I mean, there's really no in between. So the first hill we had to climb was convincing legislators and the public that this is a problem that parents are not equipped to solve by themselves. And I think we largely over time sort of won that argument. And the second misconception, I would say, is this is more on the legislative level. Well, can't we solve this by just regulating? In other words, can't we have an agency, federal or state or both, that says, okay, social media company, you can do X or you can't do Y, and then they comply with the regulation, and then the problem goes away. But that's really, and Ed can touch on this as well, I mean, that's really not an adequate, because of the financial incentives and the amount of resources that some of these companies have for lawyers to fight the regulation, to challenge it in court. It's difficult to craft a perfect regulation that even solves a discrete problem. So it's like, for example, you promulgated a regulation that banned auto scroll. Well, what's auto scroll? Well, now we're in court deciding what auto scroll is. So and that had been tried before, and I'm not saying there isn't a role for it, but we needed some legislation that changed the financial incentive these companies face in order to really make any progress on the issue.
Thank you very much. So I think you mentioned that it's not an easy thing to go after corporations and in the context of addiction. It's a journey, right? It's an uphill battle that you had to go through, starting from a whistleblower, Then there was the 2022 attempt for a law, and then the 2024 that passed. So I think, Ed, from a legislative standpoint, what was the lesson we learned from 2022 that really paved the way for the success in 2024?
Well, I think the really, in a way, the lesson that was learned was that we were on the right track in focusing on addiction. And the reason we, beginning in 2021, focused on addiction was three reasons. The first was legal. The United States has a law which is shorthanded Section 230 here, the Communications Decency Act. And Section 230, broadly speaking, says that we can't hold platforms liable for harms that are caused by third-party content. So way back, it's not that long ago now, but the law in 2021, when we were embarking on this, on Section 230 was not particularly great. There were several examples which differentiated, several cases that differentiated between things that platforms do alone and holding them liable, and things and harms that are caused by third-party content and for which we cannot hold platforms liable. So the three reasons to focus on addiction originally were, the first was legal. If we're focusing on the way that content is being delivered, then we're focusing kind of on the television set and not on the program. So the television set is something that is it's verbs that the platforms conjugate in the first person. It's what they do. And so our theory of the case was that that's different legally than harms caused by the third-party content. And so legally, we would have a clearer lane. That was not particularly clear then. It's quite clear now. The case law has dramatically improved very fast in this area for the United States. The second reason to emphasize addiction was purely political. Addiction is a medical condition that people are familiar with. We were able to talk about it in a way that already was something that was bad. We weren't talking about our bill in the sense of, oh, it makes kids sad, or, oh, it distracts them from their homework. It was a medical condition tied to the neurologists that a lot of the platforms were actually hiring to figure out how to make us more addicted. Related to that was a lot of the press around Frances Haugen's whistleblowing was about the conceited addictive nature of what they were doing. The third part of the reason to emphasize addiction was from a policy point of view, as sort of Jessica pointed out, it's necessary but insufficient to address the broader harms of social media. Whether it's potentially buying fentanyl online, whether it's potentially being sex trafficked, whether it's potentially having body dysmorphia and anorexia, pro-anorexia content thrown at you. Everything about the things that are bad about social media are worse if you can't walk away. So those were the three reasons. So I think that the eventual success of getting Senate Bill 976 passed that outlaws addictive feeds in social media platforms was really kind of an affirmation that we just, by dumb luck, kind of got it right in 2021 and 2022.
That's great, thank you. So we're starting to get a good amount of questions. So I think we should switch to the audience Q&A and get the debate going. So Brennan, what do you have for us?
Sure. So the first question is on whether some of this conversation extends to adults too. So Loic asks whether social media is also an issue for adults because of addiction, lack of judgment, fake news, etc. Could we apply some of this legislation for children to adults too?
Who would be the best? Maybe Jordan, you want to answer that question from a legislative point of view? When you thought about it, did you think about it for adults?
I can, but the panel may have a slightly different view. I mean, adults are adults. They're free to live their lives how they wish to live them, generally in America. And their brains are fully formed to the extent that they can make choices about appropriate use of things that may have some benefit, but also have major drawbacks if you don't use them properly. And kids aren't in that status. I mean, the neurology is very clear that kids are more prone to addiction. That's why we have age limits on tobacco and alcohol and gambling and what have you. there's a space in which especially a teenage brain has to develop to where they are the most vulnerable victims. And the evidence is that the harm from addiction to social media befalls children and does more damage at exponentially higher rates than it does for adults. So I'm not saying that adult addiction to social media isn't a problem. I was a politician for 6 years, and trust me, I watched people online tear each other apart, and they probably didn't feel great about their lives while doing that. So, but I think from a legislative standpoint, protecting kids and doing any of this is very hard. It's very difficult. I mean, it's David versus Goliath. If Goliath had a gun, David had pebbles. Okay, that's the power dynamic. So we should focus on protecting, in my view, at least to start, protecting the most vulnerable members of our population, which is our kids.
And if I can just add to that, I really echo what Jordan said. Obviously, at the Children's Advocacy Institute, our focus is going to be protecting children. But I do think in the long run, starting with a population that pretty much everybody agrees deserves protection and needs protection is a really important starting place. We had success in the tobacco fights against big tobacco by really focusing on the fact that, the tobacco industry was marketing to children to try to get young people to start using tobacco that would continue throughout their lives. So very similarly here, it is a place for us to start and find consensus somewhat more easily.
I'll add one thing. It's not strictly speaking social media, but we are seeing an increasing number of bills addressing idiosyncratic areas where adults are the victims of internet abuse. There's a bill pending in California now that I hope gets out, authored by a Republican, that deals with the consent of individuals appearing in pornographic websites, and would essentially require affirmation of consent for everybody who appears there. Well, that, by and large, hopefully, addresses the issues related to adults. You're seeing that with deepfakes. So as the problems of social media, AI, and the internet generally converge, you're seeing more and more legislative efforts to address harms to adults.
And if I could just add one more thing. If you can solve this problem for kids, the thing about kids is they grow up into adults, right? And the flip side, if the companies can get the kids addicted at age 13, then they've got a lifetime user of their product and a lifetime stream of profits. But if we can protect them at that age, that flips on its head. And now we've helped those people as they become 22, 25, 35-year-olds.
Thank you. I think we had a good segue for the next question. Renan, go ahead.
Yeah, so next question is from Giza, and she says, we talk a lot about social media, thinking of Insta, TikTok, Facebook. Are you including YouTube and its algorithms as well? Because nowadays YouTube videos are actively used by teachers as teaching tools, and from personal experience and conversations with educators and school police online safety officers, inappropriate and dangerous content, including how to build ghost guns, gets into the algorithm too easily. And then a follow-up to that question, I guess the question really is how to craft regulations that are sensitive to today's educational system and sensitive to keeping kids safe, as well as recognizing the kids' right to information.
I'll take a whack at the YouTube one. So that is a superb question because it's a very hard one. So California has settled on a legislative definition of social media platform that we believe does cover YouTube. But one of the things that differentiates YouTube is its open nature, and as opposed to being a closed set. So there is, I wouldn't say there's lack of consensus. There is a consensus, at least in the child community, that many of the things that afflict children because of social media are visited in YouTube. But there is not complete agreement about the degree of harm that comes from YouTube versus the traditional platforms. So for example, the the notifications that were outlawed but are currently in legal limbo in SB 976, where you have snap streaks being sent to you to get come back online, come back online, come back online. You don't see that with YouTube. So there's a bit of a fuzziness about that right now, which is really yet to be settled. It's a fantastic question.
And
Thank
I would
you.
just follow up as well, because you bring up the value and the utilization of YouTube in education. And I think that's a real challenge. I think is, and I think this is a good time to talk about the fact that even though we are advocating legislation and regulation, we recognize that there are positive aspects of social media. There's positive aspects of utilizing the educational resources on YouTube. So this really is a journey of figuring out how to hit the sweet spot where we can ensure protection of kids from those high level harms that we're talking about, the addiction. Like Ed is saying, it's clear when there are bells and whistles that are built into these systems that are intending to keep kids engaged in a way that is unhealthy. And frankly, we know that the technology companies have the ability, they have the capability and the resources to figure out better than we do how, in fact, to regulate themselves such that the positive aspects of this technology can be utilized for education, for socialization, for kids being able to connect with each other in their communities, while still protecting them from the more harmful aspects.
Thank you, Jessica. Brennan, what do we have next?
All right, yeah, with lots of questions here. The next one's from Paul. Paul says that he believes phone-free schools are clearly a step in the right direction, but in the Bay Area, it doesn't seem like many public schools are adopting that approach. Are there specific reasons why this change hasn't gained more traction?
Parents, I can say that's one consideration. I think there are a lot of parents who are concerned about their kids not having access to a phone during school. I think it comes from, a lot of terror that we have about situations in school, like we saw yesterday in Minnesota, where there are school shootings. And this, I think, is an opportunity for public education, which is a really important part of everything that we're doing, is, letting parents understand that, those kinds of risks that they're concerned about are exceedingly rare, whereas the risks associated with having phones available to kids and the distractions of having them in school and the impact on their education and the risk of cyberbullying while they're at school, those are much more prevalent. Those are much greater, and that the schools can ensure that there are ways to keep communication with parents when necessary. So it really needs to be a partnership between the parents and the schools, rather than something that seems to be a conflict based on fear or lack of understanding.
Thank you.
All right, next we have a question from Kathy. She's asking the panel to please detail the content of the law that was recently passed, what the limitations were, and what the results have been.
Well, it's probably 976. It'd be fairly long to explain all of it. The most important, it's SB 976 here in California, passed in 2024. That, if I can put it in the chat, I'll put a link to it in the chat in a moment. The most important part of it, which was inspired by Jordan's first bill, is that it prohibits what are defined as addictive feeds, meaning any kind of serving up of content to a child that is based on information that the platform has that is associated with the child. So this is meant to essentially restore control of what the child sees to the child. So, for example, content that is sought out by a child is not content that is considered to be addictive. So if you, excuse me, I live in Sacramento, therefore I have allergies. If you look at Mr. Zuckerberg's chart from many years ago, where he plots what user engagement means, which is the phrase he uses for how long someone stays on a screen, you'll see under his own chart that if this is the content moderation line, this is the stuff that gets cut off under their content moderation policies. No matter where you draw it, according to his chart, if the closer you get to it, the user engagement spikes. And so that's a lot of the reason why you see negative content everywhere on social media. What keeps teen girls online? Well, anxiety about their body image, you know, to take one example. So it's not good stuff, let's put it that way. It's not cat videos and puppies. It's stuff that makes you angry and scared that is the most likely to keep you online to the next video and the next video. So anyway, that's the most important part of that bill. There are many other bills that have been signed into law here, many of which have been sponsored by Kai and authored by Jordan, dealing with cyberbullying, sex trafficking, the appropriate design of the product, another bill co-authored by Mr. Cunningham, deep fakes, mental health analyses of social media, the rights of children who are vlogging online. A whole bunch of stuff has been passed, but a lot of it's been held up in court. And candidly, with the rapid expansion of AI, we're seeing a lot of things get worse while the courts are figuring out where exactly these laws stand. And eventually, it'll be the U.S. Supreme Court that decides the scope of this Section 230 question and the question of our First Amendment as applied to social media platforms. That'll probably happen in the next 2 years.
So I'd ask a follow-up question, Ed, is so we pass this law, but what are the mechanisms in place to ensure compliance to the law?
Well, that's in many ways the biggest fight. So Jordan's original bill and the bills that are best are ones that allow individual families who are hurt to be able to enforce the law or get compensation for the harms caused to them. There's a variety of reasons for that, but one of which is that what we call public prosecutors here, which are lawyers that are full-time employees of a state government agency, they are under-resourced. They are overwhelmed with competing priorities. And many of the times, in many instances, those lawyers simply aren't as good as the ones that are out there making more money, that are both defending the social media platforms, but also suing them. So one of the things that happens in Sacramento, but also federally, is that if the technology companies feel as though they can't stop the underlying bill from moving, they seek an amendment that prevents private individuals from being able to sue to enforce that law. And in SB 976, that's actually what happened. In SB 976, which is the addictive feed bill I was just mentioning, there is only one agency in the state that can enforce that law, and it's California's Attorney General. So one of the ways, again, that big tech companies can kind of quietly work their magic is the bill may get signed by our governor, but the likelihood of actually enforcing it in any kind of vigorous way can be very minimal. So, but anyway, that's who's able to enforce 976. A lot of the bills that we at Kai have gotten signed by the governor have permit and do permit individuals who are harmed, who have a stake in it, to be able to sue.
Thank you, Ed. Brennan, you want to go ahead with another question?
Yeah, do we have time for some more?
Yeah, plenty. We have like 20 minutes.
Great. Next question from Lazar. Does the emerging data imply that age limits similar to tobacco and alcohol would be appropriate for social apps as well? How strongly are folks feeling about this?
Actually, if I can add to it, you know that in France, there is strong voices, including the president, that social media should be banned altogether under 15. No access at all on under 15. ban phone in school, this sort of thing. So how do we feel about this?
I can offer some legislative history perspective on that. I did carry a couple different versions of parental notification and consent for minors. The first version of that bill, this would be 2019 maybe, was the parent had to verify and consent that they knew their child was getting an account, and there'd be a verification process. If for 15 years old and younger, we had to amend that to 13 years old and younger. The first try, we could not get it off the assembly floor. It was killed on the floor. The second try, we changed a few other things. We got it to the Senate, the other house in the legislature. It died in the Senate. The third try, I brought in Ed for some help, and we got a much more watered down version of it. So even on and that was not, to be clear, that was not a ban on use of social media. That was if you're 13 and you want to get an account, your parent has to say that they're okaying it. And so even that, now the landscape has changed. I think that those types of bills probably would have a more favorable reception today because of all the work that this sort of coalition has put in. But I think politically, outright bans, even for minors, that's still an uphill fight, an uphill battle in America and in California.
Is it a First Amendment issue for some folks, or is it what is the core issue behind it?
I think for some it's a freedom kind of First Amendment issue. For others, it's sort of like, well, social media has a lot of good applications, and it's not the majority of users that are suffering addiction and getting eating disorders and having suicidal ideations. I mean, it's a large percentage. Scary 6 to 15% is very high, and that's not good, but that's not everybody. And to my earlier point, kids use these apps to stay connected, and kids need to be connected. They need to be in social groups. We want them to be in good ones. We don't want them to be bullied. We don't want them to be harmed, but we want them to be connected with each other. And in the modern era, these apps are what a lot of kids use. So I think realistically, I don't see a ban sort of coming to fruition, at least in California, anytime soon.
I think when we were prepping for this conversation, Ed had an image that really stuck with me, which I thought was really good. It's like going to a park, right? And maybe you want to say it. You'll say it better than I would say it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of the reasons you've heard, we're agnostic about age verification standards. They're also very difficult to pass constitutional muster. But our preference is if there's a neighborhood park, when I was a kid, we used to just go play in the park because it was safe, and our parents didn't have to sit there and watch over us. And our aspiration is to try and make social media a safe place for kids to be without the parents having to peer over their shoulders. And I see in one of the comments, someone mentioned LGBTQ plus kids. That's a big deal here in California. And one of the arguments against age verification that's made here, which it's commonly opposed by queer groups here, is that, and it's to some degree correct, that those kids are able to find community online that their parents would find abhorrent if they knew about it. So anyway, for all of those reasons, I think that's a little bit of a last resort for us. One place that does appear to be getting traction on age verification, both federally and in California this year, is age verification for the download of the apps from an app store. There is a bill by Assemblymember Wicks this year that would require that, and there is a federal bill that's pending. And by the way, the other problem that comes from that politically is that in order to verify the age, you would have to upload to these sites some sort of verification, some sort of official document. Well, that sparks the data privacy concerns about who's going to have access to that document, what are you going to do with it, and all that. So it's probably going to be an important piece of this when all this dust settles, but right now it's, for us, a harder pathway.
Thank you. Brennan, do you have a other question for us?
We do. Next question's on data security and digital privacy from Giza. We're living in a place where all of our online data, including our shopping habits, are being being mined to build profiles of us and used by retailers. Where does online privacy fit into this legal discussion based on your viewpoint?
Ed,
Or it
Ed.
is.
Well, it's all getting worse is the answer. It's getting worse in the United States because of the ever increasing amount of consolidation of tech companies. If you look at the leading AI companies, they're funded by, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, the exception being OpenAI, of course. But so there's more and more consolidation of the people who have the data. And because of the phenomenal improvement in AI, there is an exponentially increasing ability to be able to mine those data. And the more that you mine the data, the more that you learn, the more that you mine the data, the more that you learn. So it's a huge part of it. I simply don't know how you put that back in the bottle at this point without, in terms of the data that's already out there versus, for example, what 976 tries to do, which is to say, well, you just can't use it for this particular purpose. But no, this is a fraction, and the denominator of it is the fact that these companies know far more about us than we actually even know about ourselves in all likelihood.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question from Pierre-Andre. What practical actions have you seen parents, schools, and communities take to protect children from social media harms? Which technological tools and approaches are providing most effective in real-world settings?
Jessica, you want to take that maybe?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think schools and parents engaging in communication, conversation, education around this is one of the more effective things to do. I think, there have been development of like parental controls and settings through some of these technologies. I can tell you firsthand that I don't think that I'm ever going to win when I'm up against my children's ability to work around those, those controls. I can't keep up with it. So I think that that's kind of a concern. And I really, encourage and have heard from mental health providers, from educators, that one of the most effective things we can do is really talk to kids about the risks and keep open lines of communication with them.
Thank you.
All right. Next question. Sorry, just one second.
I see one about Netflix and
Yeah, we can go there. With the increasingly algorithmic nature of streaming services, interested in Christoph and everyone else's opinion on regulation as someone previously at Netflix and what's currently being worked on at Crunchyroll.
I think so. If there is some commonalities, yes, in terms of algorithms and machine learning, but the goals are very different. For a streaming service, whether it's Netflix or Amazon or Disney, the goal is to present to you the content you want to watch, right? Streaming services have got big catalogs of content, huge catalog of content. And if you think of it, TV is a small screen in which to display which content you would want to watch. So the dilemma is how to offer a good service to our members. We have to figure out which content we're going to put on that screen that's going to interest you. And yes, of course, streaming service want you to click on it and watch it. It's part of their business model, because the more you watch, the more you're likely to stay a member. But I don't think it's that different to TV programming in the good old days when some TV execs were like, okay, what movie are we going to show on a Sunday night, right? How are we going to, we want to pick a movie that people like. it's kind of the same thing, except that you use machine learning. And in a company like Netflix, you know, it's completely anonymized. It's based on the things you like compared to other people who like the same thing, and trying to figure out, okay, well, if you like this sort of things, we're going to offer you more. If you like horror movies, we're not going to offer you a lot of romantic comedies. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. That wouldn't make you happy, right? So that I think is a different goal. And ultimately, is you watch movie, you like them, you don't like them, and you move on. I don't think we have the same addiction issues on streaming services and social media, but maybe the panel wants to say their views.
I kind of want to amplify that a little bit. We had to discuss this when we were talking about addiction, you know, in the state capitol and other places. We had to make these differences clear, and I think that they are clear. There is not a corresponding social and broader community aspect to Netflix or any other streaming services as there is with social media. And part of what makes social media so potentially damaging for kids is the fact that what happens on their feeds can be seen by all of their friends in real time. And so that's social part. And the fact that that can reinforce some pretty bad stuff is really entirely missing from the streaming service example. So I think it's a pretty big difference for Netflix to keep you on. It has to be offering you entertainment that you find entertaining. What's happening in social media is sort of the neurological equivalent of Netflix being able to pipe vaporized heroin into your living room to keep you online. They are probably an exaggeration, but there is a very significant, you know, difference. Just the little like button, you know, that's a dopamine hit. Somebody likes your post, right? That's a dopamine hit that keeps you online. They hired neurologists to figure that out. Just doesn't really exist, the streaming service. It's just one small example.
In addition to this, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just to add on another real world example of that phenomenon and the social aspect of social media amplifying potential harms, especially with kids, was an early lawsuit brought against Snapchat that had put a speedometer in the app so that it was shared. Whatever speed you were going when you were driving a car was shared with all of your friends. Well, shock of shocks, some teenage boys decided to engage in a contest to see who could drive the fastest, and with predictable tragic results for some of those boys. And a lawsuit was brought against Snapchat that was actually an early lawsuit dealing with some of these issues. But you know, you just don't have and harms of that nature when you're in your living room using Netflix.
In addition to the distinction between social platforms and other types of platforms, is there a correlation between these types of harms and their monetization strategies, so ad-based or subscription-based?
Ed, you want to take that?
What a good question. I don't know about it in the negative, meaning I don't know about whether I'm unaware, put it this way, of subscription bases having the same problems as the ad-based ones. And that's in part, I would imagine, although I haven't candidly thought about it until now, because the revenue stream from a subscription basis is not as either at all or as much going to be tied to how long you actually spend online. What is similar between television, oldie time television, and social media is the more time you spend watching television, the more ads you're going to see. That is the model of the ad-based social media platform. So I think that the profit motivated pressure to keep eyes on screens is certainly far greater when it comes to an ad-based service than it would be purely to a subscription.
Definitely, I think subscription is about the link is between engagement, to reuse the convert terms, and retention. The link is the more you watch the service, to a certain extent, the more likely you are to stay as a customer. That makes sense. But that's stopped there. It's purely about retention.
All right, we have another question for Ed. Looking for the names of those bills seeking to have people verify ages before downloading.
Yes, I don't remember it. I will find it right now.
All right, we'll follow up in the chat on that one. Another question from Giza. Could states mandate digital security knowledge as part of educational standards?
Jessica.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think you know, Jordan can tell me otherwise if I'm being too bold to say that that could be mandated. But I think the idea of that being incorporated into school curriculum is exactly what we need. I think that not only for the well-being of kids, but this is the world that our young people are going to be living in throughout their lives professionally and personally. And I just think education around I mean a variety of aspects of utilizing technology well, I think is going to be an important part of our education. So yeah, I would support that, and I do think it's possible.
I went ahead and put it in the chat. AB 1043.
Thank you. Jordan, would you have a different opinion on education?
No, not at all. And in fact, you know, we educate kids about dangers and harms throughout the public school system from kindergarten through high school. And, you know, stay away from that creepy guy in the park that offers you candy. Like that's what I was taught growing up. And now that creepy guy in the park that's offering you candy is probably on a social media app, and it takes a different type of form. So we just need, it's a concept that's been in practice for a long time. We just need to, I would say, modernize it. And there are efforts to do that. And, you know, I've long ago worked on some legislation on sex trafficking and educating kids as to harm. I mean, in California, you can put it right in the education code. School districts have to do this, and it becomes a mandate.
Okay, well, thank you. We're getting close to the end of our hour. What I'd like to do now is going through the panel, ask each of you, like within 1 minute, 2 minutes. 1 minute would be better, but 2 minutes if you need it, to kind of summarize what you love people to leave this conversation with, how they can help, how they can, you know, talk to their friends and keep us going, keep us doing our best to protect our youth from social media addiction. Jessica, can I start with you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would suggest that that folks keep in mind that this is one of the rare bipartisan issues that, you know, we've seen, at least in the United States during a time that is, you know, really fractured here. I think if we keep the focus on protecting children and recognizing their vulnerabilities, and really advocating for adults and industries to take responsibility for kids now and in the future. I mean, I do think that, you know, despite some disagreement in, you know, how to do that or where the boundaries may lay, I think that at its core, I think everyone who's a parent, especially, or anyone who sees kids out and about, recognize, you know, that the phone is now an appendage. And I think everybody understands the impact that social media and these, especially these addictive feeds, have on even our adult brains. So I would just really, you know, encourage folks to continue building community around the idea of prioritizing the protection of children. I think folks are ready to hear it, and I think it's a place where we can build consensus.
Thank you, Jessica. Jordan, do you want to tell us what you love people to leave this conversation with?
Yeah, I would say, you know, be bold. It's a big fight. It's a righteous fight. It's important. Jessica's right. This is the most bipartisan, cross-partisan, multi-partisan issue I've ever seen ever. It's critically necessary to keep an entire generation that's being harmed in a way that will affect them for life, from from that harm. It's publicly massively supported. We had a poll a couple years ago. 82% of Californians agree with the statement that big tech and government should do more to protect kids online. I mean, you can't find an 82% agreement issue in California or the United States of America, for that matter, anywhere else. I mean, so the public's with us, the parents need our help, the kids need our help, and we're just up against, a lot of inertia and a massive disparity in resources, frankly. But I think over time, if people keep up the fight and are intelligent and flexible, I think the public will win out. I mean, generally in democracy, eventually the things the public wants to see happen eventually happen.
Thank you. Ed.
Yeah, I'll pivot off that with two things. When our Federal Trade Commission here fined then Facebook $5 billion, which was then a record fine, the next morning Facebook stock went up. And the reason is because Facebook is so huge and so wealthy that a $5 billion fine is more than absorbable as the cost of doing business. So in talking about being bold, if we want to change the behavior of these companies, the bottom line, in my opinion, is this: hurting children has to cost more than not hurting them. If the profit isn't taken out of harming children, they'll continue to do it. And that means that Europe, point number two, has a huge role to play in leading here. The United States, both for a ton of political reasons, but a lot of jurisprudential reasons that don't exist in Europe, will have a challenging time actually addressing this question. But if Europe were to move to a system where harming kids, where they take the profit out of harming children, well, that will work. And an awful lot of the bills that we're doing here are trying in our own way to do that. So be bold. Europe has a massive leadership role to play in protecting children all over the world. And not only that, people all over the world. Let's not forget that Facebook was blamed by Amnesty International, the UN, and their own expert panel for contributing to genocide in Myanmar of the Rohingya people. So Europe has a huge role to play. And if I were to direct you in one direction, follow the money, as they say here.
Thank you. I would like to thank the panel, Jessica, Ed, Jordan. It was a great conversation. Also, thank you for everything you're doing to protect our kids, our grandkids. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Brennan, thank you for helping us with the tech, and the audience, thank you for a great question. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.